Friends, today's NRI Summer program from Los Angeles brought to you commercial free by listeners like you. Your generous donations make possible for us to stay commercial free, and today's show is pre-recorded. If you have a question for the guest, please send an email to nrisummer@gmail.com. We will follow up with the guest and find the answer for you. Thank you for your support.
Good morning, good evening to all our listeners on NRI Summer. A very warm welcome to NRI Summer. This is your host, Suresh. Today we'll talk about the LGBT or the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights, specifically in India, which have always been historically very contentious subject. And recently, even with the Supreme Court decision to criminalize the consensual sex, it has been somewhat considered to be a big blow to the LGBT community. But the issues of this LGBT are not just limited to the law and order. It's also very much a very social, cultural, political issue, because Indian society has always considered this as a taboo. You know, nothing. We cannot discuss this in the public. We cannot acknowledge this in the public. So we'll talk about all these issues, and to highlight these issues, we have with us Sadhak Navadeep Bharat, or known as Navdeep, who works very closely with the LGBTQ community and is involved at various levels, including the research, and is also a part-time activist. So, welcome Navdeep to NRI Summer.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you.
So, Navdeep, interestingly enough, when I asked you about your work, you said you work with the LGBTQ community. We all know what the LGBT stands for. What does the Q in LGBTQ stand for?
Q stands for two things. One is queer, which is like an umbrella word for all LGBT. Or another thing, what it represents is questioning. People necessarily need not have all the clarity about their gender and sexuality, right always. They can be still in a phase of questioning, or still going through that. So Q also represents questioning.
I see. And we'll talk a little bit about how your involvement got started with this LGBTQ community, and also talk about on the ground, because you also work with the community on the ground. We'll talk about their issues and also overlay some of the social and political context. How did your involvement with this community start?
It started with my realization and acceptance of my own sexuality and gender, I guess. It was back in, I've at least realized that I was gay when I was 18, and I took some time to accept it, and that initial thing is more or less there with almost all people, because we live in a country where sex itself is a big taboo, and now you realize that your sexuality is something not off the mainstream. So as anyone else, I took some time to accept it and go through it. After that, I thought this is not something to be really worked out, and I was doing my regular activism in case of rural agriculture kind of things, and I was living away from Hyderabad. It was then when I heard a news of student committing suicide in a university in Hyderabad because he was gay and he was bullied, and the institute was not ready there to support him and kind of consider it as an issue to deal with. And that is when I thought this is not something, a very small or a personal thing that I can sit calm and not completely ignore about it. So that is when I got back to Hyderabad and started working with the community and realizing and understanding different dynamics of the community, which is being not only just marginalized but completely misunderstood and misrepresented across the culture, politics, and everything.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting that you said, you yourself had this realization, and you acknowledged, and you also confronted probably your own self, and then you decided to work. But how easy or difficult or challenging has this whole journey been once you had the realization to actually, tell your parents, tell your friends, tell your peers, tell the society by and large that, hey, this is my sexuality and, this is who I am, this is what defines me?
Yeah, I guess I don't know how difficult it has been to me, but I think it has been quite difficult, or it is kind of still difficult to my parents and a few of my friends, because the kind of the class I come from, so I'm little privileged coming from a middle class family, whatever. But that for the middle class strata in this country, that status, prestige, and respect in the society, to be part of the society is something quite important than anything else, and. The whole fear is about how that will be affected, I guess, at least in case of my parents. And though I have my initial inhibitions to really accept my own sexuality and things, once it is done, I decided I will come out to my parents, and I did that. And I decided to work with the community and went ahead with that. Yes, of course, my parents had initial difficulties. They still do have certain difficulties with it, not that they're completely are in terms with it, but I think they come from a different thought process, different generation, understandings and beliefs. They'll take their own time, and I think it's their journey to work with it, and it's my journey to go ahead. And I think we constantly negotiate, but in case of my friends, most of my friends have been supportive. Most of my graduation teachers have been supportive, actually. But there are also few friends, yes, of course, who still believe that I need to be taken to a doctor to be cured or whatever.
Right.
I understand their good intention, but I also see where it comes from. So it's a mixed reaction from friends, from teachers, from family. And my cousins still have difficult time to get in terms with it, or get in terms with my own self. So most of them are there, placed in US and working in huge MNCs and quite gone around and seen the world. They don't want to really see someone in the family who is gay and who has a different gender identity and sexuality. So it's been little not so easy with family in such sense. But in case of society, I think though it is difficult and challenging, I think once I've decided this is what I need to be and put up with, I'm quite okay with whatever it is now.
I see. Now, I guess for you, as you mentioned, because you had your friends supporting you, your teachers supporting you, and to a certain extent your parents, do you think the same kind of acceptance, if it was there for someone who is not from the middle class, but rather is from a very financially poor background, or belong to the lower section of the society, how much of these situations actually make things worse? Like that student who had that unfortunate incident, who claimed his own life. How much do you think all these factors weigh in?
It's of course a difficult part, whether whatever the class you come from, so you come from a middle class or lower middle class, or from a poor background, backward class. I think class doesn't provide security from everything. It doesn't provide everything in the society. It plays differently in different things in different situations. And in case of alternate sexualities and non-conforming gender identity people, it's when it comes to middle class, it's a different thing, that you are little educated, you have language, you can articulate and you can read, you have access to internet, you have access to different media, a lot of stuff. But I think it's quite more challenging and difficult when it comes to someone who doesn't have these resources to access, who has no language to talk about it. And that is what is the case with larger section of rural community and also the non-English speaking community in India. I mean, more or less in India, the LGBT movement remained to be, at least LGB, let me say, not T movement. Transgender movement is again different, but LGB movement remained largely a middle class. I'll not call elite, but yeah, a typical middle class movement. So it has not gone down to the roots, to the regions and to different classes and, to the different rural strata and all that yet. So in that sense, I cannot even imagine what kind of situation would be a person, a gay or lesbian woman in a rural background with, no place to even discuss your own body, your own sex, your own desires or anything, to talk about something completely, not so considered to be our culture and tradition is something very challenging. And that is something to be really looked into yet.
Right, man. And I guess do you work predominantly in Hyderabad, or your work takes you to other rural places within Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, or anywhere else in India?
My work is predominantly in Hyderabad, but in a sense, within Hyderabad, going to rural areas, I don't know. I mean, it never really happened, but last time I've been to Maharashtra, Nanded, which is again like not really a big town or a huge thing. I've been to university in Nanded, they've called. So universities and educational spaces are taking little interest in talking, but again, for you as an individual to go and talk about these things in rural areas is quite a challenging thing if you don't come from, certain institute that they at least look up to. Because they don't really look up to you just as an individual and, you can talk about these things. But otherwise, I do go around with to different institutes, places and things wherever, there's a requirement or necessity. Wherever there is a requirement of awareness programs, people organizing something. But going to rural areas within Andhra Pradesh regarding LGB is something which has not happened so far.
I mean, as you mentioned, you probably interact with a lot of students, your own friends. You mentioned that they believed you needed to get some medical attention, and you have some sort of a disease and that needs to be cured. So these are some of the stereotypes that are out there. These are some of the misconceptions or myths that people have. So, I'd like to mention a few so that our listeners can actually, also help clear their misconceptions in the process. So, some of them, like, is being gay a personal choice, or is it a medical situation, or is it as natural as, heterosexuality?
You see, in the case of the whole science thing, if I bring in the debate of science, in 1974, the American Association of Psychiatry has, pulled down the homosexuality or different gender identities as from the list of diseases or disorders. Following that, World Health Organization also did the same thing. But again, in regard with the Medical Council of India and all that, there are two classification of sexualities. One is, syntonic, and another is ego-dysyntonic, sexuality. Syntonic is where you have, you're all comfortable with your sexuality, whatever it is, either heterosexuality or homosexuality, and you don't feel it need to be changed. But in ego-dysyntonic sexuality, you feel that your sexuality need to be changed and you can take medical attention, which itself is a big mockery, in a sense that in a society which is predominantly heterosexual, patriarchal, a person who has been made feel that being homosexual is sick, it's not good, and, made him feel vulnerable, traumatic and everything, and still expect that person to be all comfortable with her sexuality is something very, funny aspect. So it's a very hypocritical thing which Medical Council of India did not took a stand yet. But homosexuality itself is not something seen within Homo sapiens or human beings alone, but it has been scientifically recorded among 1,500 different animal species across the nature. So to say homosexuality is a choice, I think I've never chosen to be gay personally, and it's not a personal choice, it's not a lifestyle. It is something, an innate, inbuilt one. I mean, like, when does one choose to be heterosexual? If that doesn't have an answer, even this doesn't have an answer. It's not a choice one makes. And there's another debate that it could be completely because of nurture, upbringing. So if upbringing is all the point, I would quote my own personal example. I had a twin brother. We both were identical twins. We both were born together, brought up together all our life. And I, yes, of course, turned out to be gay, and my brother is straight. I mean, was straight, he's no more, but yeah. So it's a completely different thing. You cannot again say just because of nurture. So, and again, also, I don't know how far should I call heterosexuality also. My father sometime back asked me, when I came out, next day he asked me, did you ever try having sex with women? I said, no, I did not. Then he asked me, would you like to? He's basically making an offer to me. Then I said, that also sounds good. I'll keep it aside. I'll think about it. Can I also offer you something? Would you want to try having sex with a man and then decide you're not homosexual? Well, my dad was taken back, of course. It was a little blunt and rude, but I thought it's necessary to make one understand that it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So there are a lot of misconceptions in that sense, yeah.
Right. And given this, patriarchal and, how we have this diabolic or various perceptions, either because of the way we have been brought up or the way the perceptions are, how much do you think the religious factors, because we time and again see with the various religion, their leaders, claiming that having same-sex relationships is against God, or it's a sin that one commits if you have same-sex relationships. How much of the religious aspect actually makes things, does it make things worse in the Indian context?
I guess in the Indian context it is quite interesting, how hypocritical and how upside down the religion has become when it comes to the whole LGBT issue itself. In a sense, they call it as not our culture, our tradition and everything. And another end, you have a huge culture, huge history, mythology, everything, talking about different sexualities and different, gender identities across the spectrum. In specific, to talk about Hindu mythology, you have Krishna constantly professing his love towards Arjuna, and certain verses in Mahabharata are very explicitly talks about Krishna's love towards Arjuna and all that, and how he calls Arjuna to be half of his body and all that. And then you have this being a land where Kama Sutra was, written, the art of sex, And in Kama Sutra, not only heterosexual identities or heterosexual acts were described, but also homosexual acts, but also orgies, but also, it spoke about men living together, being as a family, and lot of things. So, isn't Kama Sutra part of Indian culture and tradition? And then you have the very popular, Ardhanadishwara Tattva, femininity and masculinity being embodied in one body, and they are not really separate entities. And then you have Harihara, where Shiva offers half of his body to Vishnu, Vishnu offers half of his body to Shiva, and they produce a child called Ayyappa, who is a god in this country, and having lakhs of devotees. And then you have, Bahuchara Devi in Gujarat, and Aravan temple in Tamil Nadu, specific to transgender people. And you have Ajanta, Ellora, Khajuraho, where you have caves depicting, carvings, homosexual art and sculptures, everything. And if you go to little of Islam and all that, then you have Sufi culture, where men dressed as women, and then they sing songs, they profess their love to God and all that. It's there across cultures, across traditions, just that now you don't want to acknowledge it, accept it. You want to call it deviant, because it threatens the whole heterosexual, patriarchal, powerful structure and system what you have put up now. And you live in that. and the whole alternate sexualities and non-conforming gender identities challenge that. And I guess religious leaders also now want to protect that rather than actually accepting what was there in their own history and mythology and culture.
Friends, NRI Samay is a non-profit independent alternate media from Los Angeles, USA, which brings positive stories from grassroots activists from all corners of India and across the world. NRI Samay does not rely on corporate funding and our shows are commercial free. We only rely on your donations. Corporate funded media is driven by the TRP rating and profits are blurring the distinction between news and entertainment. Why do our news channels talk so much about cricket, movies, accidents, popular figures' personal lives, babies of heroines, gossips, etc., while they should be covering the struggles of people, inequality in our society, rural issues, and border security issues? Why did our media raise some corruption crusaders to the sky on one day and shut them off completely when graft charges were raised on those corporate sponsors? Media relies so much on the corporate funding and government blessings that they cannot report independently. NRI Samay is different. We don't accept funds from any corporations and hence our shows are commercial free. We completely rely on donations from you. Please consider donating to NRI Samay and please go to nrisamay.com and donate generously. This is the only way together that we can continue NRI Samay. All donations are kept transparent on nrisamay.com. And if you have any questions, please write to nrisamay@gmail.com.
Now, given all this, Navdeep, you have religious opposition to this, you have the political opposition, you have even the law tramping down on, same-sex relationships. How do you create space to have a reasonable dialogue? Like you said, your parents are yet to come to terms with your sexuality. That's because of their upbringing, right? So in all this atmosphere, in such an atmosphere, how would you create that kind of a space to have this kind of a dialogue and engagement so that people can actually relate to what you are going through and other people who belong to the LGBT community?
It's a constant negotiation, constant fight to create that space, engage, have a dialogue, because there is an absolute silence. In case of India, it's like everything happens underneath the carpet. Like you have men who have sex with men, you have married men who go around and have sex with men, you have HIV programs which talks about men who have sex with other men and, hijras and transgender community, but only in terms of HIV. But you don't want to talk about them as people who exist, live and have their lives also other than having sex. There is no space in that term, people way before, from 70s, 80s, one by one started, across the country talking about it and, entering into dialogue, negotiating and, having a discourse about it, engaging with different communities across. But it has come a long way in India. There was a time when, you wouldn't, lot of even so-called liberal groups wouldn't be talking about something like this. But today this is discussed across. But again, it's a very limited, a very small work, whatever is happening now. In case of Hyderabad, if I say 4 years back, say for 3 to 4 years back, there was nothing. There was actually nothing. No discussion, nothing. But it slowly started. And we are at a place where now we engage with different groups. Now, as an LGBT community, we engage with different groups, different organizations, go around to do different awareness programs and participate and, engage with media, engage with political parties. That we have come to a place where we are at least doing that much from where there was nothing. So I think it's a struggle. It's a fight, everyday fight, and you have a different blows from different times, like from Supreme Court, from some political party statement, from some religious statement. You feel vulnerable, you feel terrible at times, but I think that's the challenge. you have constant resistance, and you will resist back, and you will fight back. And we are not asking as people any special place, any kind of special identity. We are asking for an equal space. If the whole idea of all humans are born equal, then let us practice that idea and let us have that in place. And I guess that is what the whole fight is, for equal space and equal rights. So it's a long way to go. It's a long way to go. As you spoke earlier, that there is a political opposition, there is a religious opposition, and then specifically in a country like India, you cannot just work with government and state and law say that it is done. You cannot. Whereas because you have various cultural, social, economical, and other kind of forces which operate in this country across the globe, but in this country extensively in a different levels completely, and where government is not all separate from these things. State is not separate from religion. State is not separate from culture, tradition, and all kind of these things in this country yet. State is not a sole thing. So just go ahead and remove Section 377, have some kind of law. It doesn't really take anywhere unless you deal with all these other forces, political forces, religious forces, social forces, and engage with them and make them part of this struggle. That is where there is some hope, and it's a huge task. It's a huge task completely. For example, say after recriminalizing consensual homosexual act, Supreme Court in 2013. In 2014, the same Supreme Court has given another judgment called Nalsa versus Union of India, saying that transgender third gender identity is a legal identity. It needs to be recognized, and government need to take steps to support people with third gender identity and all that. How contradictory this judgment is that there are people with different gender identities, so they need to be respected and all that, but they cannot have sex. If they have sex, it's a crime. So they can live their life, do everything, but not have sex. So two contradictory statements, and in spite of this judgment, it's been a year now. It's been almost a year now. But nothing has been done by either central government or any of state governments yet. So that makes it clear how difficult it is to really go through and get things done in this country and in this kind of space where we are right now.
Has the situation gotten any better for the transgender communities or the hijra communities? Because I believe people do resonate with them more than gay and lesbians, because they have been around for a very long time, at least socially, culturally, and even so. Has their situation been any better, given that even Supreme Court passed this order saying, hey, the third gender needs to be recognized, and although they are yet to implement it, do you see any change in them being accepted?
I think in this particular context, transgender people, especially hijra community and the trans women across this country, hijra in Telangana and Andhra, Aravani community, and it's with different names across. This transgender community has been the flag bearers of LGBT movement in this country, I would say, because way before the whole terminology has come to this country or anywhere, they have a history of almost 4 centuries. They are part of the society. They are part of the whole system and everything, and they've been living among people. Back pre-colonial times, they were part of the courts, they were part of the kingdoms, they were part of the army, they were part of, lot of things. Post-colonial, it's a different thing that they all been criminalized, and either Section 377, either Criminal Rights Act or anything as such, they are post-colonial acts, which are brought by British government across their 42 colonies which were their ruling, as per which even transgender community has been, kind of completely stigmatized, criminalized, and thrown out of the, whatever the society they are living in. And that continues even now. Transgender community, in the case of LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, your sexuality is something at least you can hide to an extent for a while and pretend to be part of the mainstream and survive, whatever. But when it comes to gender as such, you cannot. You don't. So you're basically kicked out of the house, as young kid. So you don't have education, then you don't have employment. You grow up in streets, you grow up with other hijra people. You either end up doing sex work or begging, not that you want to, but you don't have any other option. And, everyday life is an abuse, nothing else. Everyday life for a transgender hijra person is an abuse. There's nothing less than that. And people talk I've been talking about rape in this country now. I mean, like, it has been discussed across, but a transgender person who does sex work, who goes out, gets raped. Like, every transgender person has a rape story to tell, or plenty of them actually. Gang rapes, everything. And there can't be a complaint. They cannot go to police station. They cannot register a complaint. There is no security. And they deserve to be raped. They are not even treated as humans. It's much terrible and worse for a hijra transgender person than anyone else, completely. Because they can't even talk, and they can't even vocal. There are no groups fighting them in that sense, and largely, and their existence itself is there, visible, but completely ignored, and their existence is only used to be abused, to traumatize, and to kind of mock and make fun, and nothing else. No, by everyone in the society. So, in a sense, the other day, I identify myself as a gender queer person, or probably say bluntly, to put it, gender for person. I don't really believe in the whole idea of gender, he and she and all that. So I do put on sari sometimes. I go out, I love wearing sari, so I go out. So last day in the Hyderabad, one popular mall, GVK mall, the security over there stopped me from entering the mall.
Really?
Just because I was in a sari. They stopped me from entering the mall. I need to have an argument and fight and say that why cannot I go in? Just because I wear a sari? So, in a sense, even in the LGBT community, there is a good amount of transphobia. So transphobia is across. Hijra community is much more marginalized than LGBT, in sense. So that's a completely different level of challenging life that one could ever, not challenging I would say, but probably more dramatic, everyday trauma, everyday issue, just because you don't identify with the gender that was assigned to you during your birth, the rest of your life becomes hell. And society makes sure that it becomes hell.
In all your work so far, I mean, given you said you've been working for the past 4 years, you probably are in touch with other people who have been associated with this cause for longer periods of time. Do you see any sections of the population, any sections of the society who have, in fact, supported your cause?
There are. I mean, like, see, there are people across. For me, there are, there are different people when it comes to LGBT. Like, there are some people who completely know the issue, are in complete solidarity, in support, understand it, have all the empathy and all that. There's another section who doesn't know anything, but want to know and have a desire of understanding, and want to change the perspectives or misunderstandings, whatever they have. And there's a completely other section which knows nothing, have no clue about anything. They don't want to know, they just want to hate. So there are these all kinds of people across. And there are people who have been fighting from 80s and 90s and doing work and all that. For example, in Hyderabad, a lot of feminist organizations, women organizations are now in support of stand by, extend their support, solidarity. And now we are also, not only that, there are now Dalit writers, Dalit communities and associations which have come together to extend their support and solidarity in Hyderabad, in specific in Hyderabad. So it's also necessary for different marginalized communities to come together and really understand each other and work with each other. I guess that will really make a difference. That's been something looked at now, at least in the scenario of Hyderabad. For example, Hyderabad Book Trust, which is a leftist book trust, has translated one of the transgender person's autobiography into Telugu and published it. Probably the first of Telugu literature in that sense. And that book was released in Usmania University by various Dalit organizations together, and that's another level to it. And the various communities from different social and cultural backgrounds are coming together and extending support. That's something to be acknowledged. Not that we are all alien, no one is there to support. It's a lone battle. It has been a lone battle. To an extent, it is still a lone battle. But still, there are people joining in. There's still people coming in.
Because I guess everyone, who is joining your support, at the end of the day, this is at a fundamental level, this is still a human rights issue at some stage. Right? It's a basic fundamental human rights issue. So I guess that's where people tend to resonate. Now, in terms of creating more awareness or having that dialogue, or we don't want another student to have that same situation that had in that university. What are some of the things that you are consciously doing, or if people would like to have these kind of conversations, what are their avenues?
I mean, coming to the whole idea of human rights, I would go little ahead and say human rights is something formulated by humans, in a world that they have created. I would say sexuality and gender is something they are natural rights. They are very much natural rights. People are born with it, born with that particular right of being associated, whatever the gender they want and whatever the sexuality, and I have their identity, and it need to be respected, protected, and safeguarded by the so-called civilized society. So, and what are the constant awareness need to be done across. My conscious effort is always, as I spoke little too much about religion and the religious scriptures, my constant idea is also to engage with religious communities and have a dialogue. Kind of try engaging with RSS, try engaging with. I know that sounds little. Too difficult and not so easy, but you need to. Unless you don't engage in a dialogue, it doesn't work out. It doesn't go anywhere. How hostile the other side of the group might be, but you need to try your best. So that is what I've been trying to engage in a dialogue with different religious groups, and have, like, for example, Ramakrishna Math. Of course, all these people denied to talk. Whenever I walked into their spaces and wanted to have a talk, all of them, including Ramakrishna Math, including RSS, they've denied. They don't want to talk about it. So, but it's been a constant effort to do that. And another major thing is that you need to have a literature which is beyond gender binary one thing, which also talks about LGBT issues. The literature, there is a lot of literature now in English. People can also get it who can access internet and read English. And this whole discourse has remained very much between the liberal, so-called liberal, and English-speaking crowd and population, because there's been no writing, nothing, no work in large scale done in regional languages in India. As I said, this autobiography of a transgender woman, Revati, is the first Telugu publication, which is the translated one. Are there no narrations? Are there no stories? Are there no issues which need to be articulated in regional languages? There are plenty, but it is not being done. I think that is very important, which need to be done. Unless you take it to common people, people who are stuck with certain understandings and things. And when I came out to my parents, they don't speak English. I need to literally sit with them and talk in Telugu. And there is nothing I can quote them. There is nothing I can ask them to read. I can only give them lots of English books, that which they cannot read, of course. So there's nothing I can ask them to read so that they can understand or get to know certain things. So in that context, it is important to bring lot of at least some basic writing which is required to be there in various languages. And I guess this literature will also help us to go to rural backgrounds and rural setups where English is not the medium of language. I cannot go and talk in a language which people don't understand. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, sexuality, gender. We don't have terms. In Telugu, even today, in spite of huge feminist movement and everything, we don't have a separate term for gender. Lingam is the same term which used for sex and gender, both the things. It's a common word. So you don't have language first to talk about it. So I guess a lot of work need to be done on that term. So I've been trying and seeing what need to be done, working with Telugu-speaking groups and communities, and also, see if there can be some amount of Telugu literature to be written, worked out, some basic, documents in Telugu to bring out and all that. That is something being worked out. Similarly, few other groups in Maharashtra are bringing out some writings in Marathi, and some in Karnataka, some in Kannada. Tamil, they already have good. Tamil is one language, I guess. They have extensive writing in terms in regard with gender and sexuality rather than any other language. So, and a lot of work yet need to be done in that sense.
And can the mythology can the mythology not take that place? Because, as you mentioned, there are various anecdotes from our Mahabharatas, Ramayanas, and would those be not useful in having that kind of a conversation? Like, for example, when you're talking to your parents, would quoting any of those anecdotes would have helped with that conversation?
It does. In a personal note, see, for someone who comes from, born into a Hindu family, comes from a Hindu background and a belief system or whatever, but for that someone, having an understanding of mythology and all that, quoting them can help in one person's particular, their own journey or coming out and process and all that. But when it comes to a larger political movement as such, to an extent, you can still refer to mythology. You can still pick out mythology and all that, because it cannot be just called, whether you believe in it or not, there is nothing called just fiction. Even if you think it is a fiction, there is nothing called just fiction. That fiction comes out of some resemblance some way in the society back then. So it does make sense, but one also need to understand when you are engaging in a political movement and all that, the kind of political baggage that mythology will carry.
Right.
And that's in a country like India. So you can, to an extent, use it, but need to make sure that we are not overflown with it. Or we are not overtaken by it again.
True.
And again, also the point is that the whole queer movement, for me, or largely the whole queer movement is a political movement, not only about your rights, not only about fighting for one personal rights and desire and sexuality and gender identity, but also to overthrow the whole patriarchal system what we are stuck up with, and also to the whole binary of he and she, the segregation of man and woman, which is one huge oppressive and discriminative structure across the globe. I guess the whole queer movement, in a sense, challenges that and need to challenge it. So you need to engage with in a wider amount of tools and instruments when you kind of looking in a broader sense of such kind.
Well, Navdeep, I can only say that you have a lot of challenges ahead of you. You have your work cut out, but I hope your constant engagement, you and your teams, will start to get those kind of change in the mindset and the way people think. And I'd like to end with the quote that there's a line that you said, and I think that summarizes everything very beautifully, that this is beyond human rights, because this is a natural right. This is the natural self of who you are. And on that note, I'd like to thank you very much for being on our show.
Thank you for having me, Suresh.
Yeah. One bit of information which I forgot to ask you is, if people want to know more about your work, or if they want to reach out to you, is there a website or an email that you could share so people, listeners, anyone can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I can share my email ID. I guess they can reach out on my email ID. My email ID is YUM for Mumbai, A for America, again A for America, T for Thailand, H for Hyderabad, A for America again, R for Rani, A for America again, N for Navdeep, I for India, @gmail.com. MAATHARANI @gmail.com.
All right. There you go, friends. Thank you for all our listeners. MataraniIndia@gmail.com is the email for Navdeep, in case you have more questions or would like to know more about his work and his team's work. And thank you once again, Navdeep, for being on our show.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you. Yeah.
Friends, if you liked today's show, please go to youtube.com/NRI Samay and click on the subscribe button. You will get notified every time we publish a new show. And you can also like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Google.